Bing bong. We are live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. But first, I'd like to thank MyNode for helping me set up and getting podcasting 2.0 all set up. So if you are not listening on podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain or Breeze, you should check me out there. If you'd like and you like the content, feel free to send me some sats. And if you are interested in running your own Bitcoin node, you should check out MyNode at MyNodeBTC and mynodebtc.com. They set me up with everything great. You can get it all set up, or you can get it all in parts separately. They have hardware and software. Overall, just great stuff out of MyNode. And now I have a very, very special guest, Alexandra 933. Alexandra, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
That's great. That's great. So, you have done quite a bit in the Bitcoin space, and the greater, I guess, crypto realm as well. But let's start it all from the beginning. Tell us about your orange pill story. How did you find Bitcoin, and how are you kind of here today?
Sure. So I first ended up, I heard about it in 2016. There's a meetup place that a bunch of us went to called Decontrol here in Vancouver. It used to be called Decentral. It was more of I guess just like a crypto thing. It wasn't so much focused on Bitcoin, although it was a Bitcoin meetup that I went to, I think. Anyway, and just general tech. So to back things up, I am a Bitcoiner. I'm not at all crypto. I am involved with the Open Crypto Foundation, but it's crypto as in cryptography. So I am a Bitcoiner first. I am a maximalist. So that's me. I became Bitcoin only in 2018. So like many people, the very beginning, you're like, oh, what's this new tech and this new tech? You're kind of in discovery mode. But I'm happy to say that I almost accidentally bought one coin, not in Bitcoin, but in something else. And it didn't go through, thankfully. So I still have that Bitcoin there. So that worked out well.
There you go. It works. Everything works out in the end. And I think everybody, kind of has their own little journey. Maybe people dabble in it and in shitcoinery every now and then. But in the end, they kind of see the light. So as I kind of stated earlier, you have a lot of stuff going on. So you're the founder of the Advanced Tech podcast, where you interview founders, leaders, developers, and emerging tech in the space. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that podcast? What kind of drove you to start that? And, what's your biggest takeaway that you've had, being able to speak to a lot of these, founders and developers in this emerging space?
Yeah. So with the show, it started out more toward open source tech. So that's why we've always kind of had that focus. So some early guests were Richard Stallman, who's super famous in the free software space, father of the movement itself, Free Software Foundation. So it kind of started there initially. So how I got involved in this space, I was a co-host on Vancouver Tech Podcast for about 6 months. Here in Vancouver with obviously Vancouver Tech Podcast with Drew Ogryzik, and he'll kill me for butchering his name, but it's approximately that. So we did a weekly show on tech, and we focused on meetups around town. We usually interviewed guests. We'd have like CTOs or developers on from different local companies, and that was really good. And that's kind of where I got my feet wet. I always wanted to have more of a broader focus. So I started my own in 2017. I did have a co-host for a while, a co-founder, Adam Dimitrick, who's CEO of Adapt Tech Group, which is actually where we have Vancouver Bitcoiners now, which is kind of awesome. That's basically where the show started. And then it turned more into it's not purely a Bitcoin focus. This is why I say emerging tech, because it's all things that are future forward looking, but grounded in reality. So we'll look at machine learning. We'll look at people who have built, when it comes to cryptocurrency, it's only Bitcoin. And what I want to kind of do is softly introduce Bitcoin to a larger tech crowd. And they'll be like, well, why isn't she talking about Ethereum or NFTs? It's like, well, because in the long run, they really don't matter. So it's Bitcoin first, and then all of the other surrounding tech. And we've got a couple of really good episodes in the pipeline. The podcast is on hiatus until probably the end of the summer, but there's a couple of great episodes coming up with some lightning experts that I'm really looking forward to putting up.
That's awesome stuff. So it sounds like a really interesting show. And if everybody, let me know when it drops. And I'll be sure to mention it and on that show to kind of help bring some people back and after it comes off of hiatus. But you mentioned it a little bit earlier. You're the executive director of Open Crypto Foundation, crypto as in cryptography. Ugh, excuse me. But why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What is the Open Crypto Foundation? What kind of stuff do you guys do? And what's the end goal of this foundation?
Yeah, so basically we changed names. We were the Open Crypto Alliance. So we were operating as that for almost a couple of years. We started in 2020, November. And it was basically a group of us. How I got connected when I went over to Prague, to HCPP, the couple of people that were part of that were there and approached me and said, we're working on stuff that we think you might be interested in as well. So come check us out. So I did. And basically it's a group of lawyers and cryptographers from all around the world in distributed parts. Half of us are public facing, half of us are completely private and anonymous, which I think is really cool because you can do a lot of work behind the scenes. So that's really good. Basically our whole mission is fighting against bad actors in this space. And there's a couple of very famous, well-known ones, not, I guess infamous would probably be a better word. From the very beginning, we had kind of who our targets were on our initial website, but I made sure, I'm like, well, we're going to be a huge target if we just like out and out say, what we're against and who we're against. But broadly, we are against people using technology in a greedy and selfish way. We very much support the open source movement. We believe software should be free, information should be free, and free in the sense of liberty, not free in the sense of no cost. So that's something that we believe in. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is standing up some community funds for, I can't talk too specifically about it, but I guess community defense funds for people who are in need. So I know that there's one core developer lawsuit that's kind of in the news headlines right now. And those types of campaigns are going to be what we're going to be fundraising for. We're also going to be opposing patents. So when a patent is filed, you have a short window between when the patent's granted and when it can be opposed. So some of our lawyers have database alerts looking for broadly blockchain crypto patents, because that's usually the language that's used. So they have an alert for that, and as soon as something comes up that kind of fits fits our mandate, we'll start looking at defending that. And we are looking to fundraise pretty substantially. Again, I can't talk too much about it, but keep an eye on our Twitter handle. We're OpenCryptoX, and we'll announce as soon as we can.
Awesome stuff. So it seems like this is kind of targeted a little bit more towards developers. Is that kind of right? Am I correct on there, or is it just kind of a little bit more broad than that?
Basically, it's any bad actors in the space. And patent trolls, we are specifically formed to be a defense against patent trolls. So there's a few other bodies in the space. So there's COPA, which is probably the most famous one. That's Crypto Open Patent Alliance. And that's actually why we looked at changing our name, because we were a little bit too close. And we're kind of similar in our mandate. We just, we look at instead opposing, versus COPA is a really great patent pool. They have a number of incredible companies that are associated. And so, yeah, that's, yeah. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, that's perfectly fine. And I think this is actually kind of a hot button topic right now, especially with, all the exchanges and everything like that kind of going on. And, I'm not sure if you caught it either, but, I think maybe an hour or two before we started this stream, I saw tweets circulating that, there's the case of Mt. Gox is finally settled, and people who lost their Bitcoin in the Mt. Gox fiasco are now allegedly getting them back. I'm not sure how that's going to work or where that's coming from or anything like that. So, I think as this space develops, that's definitely going to be something that's definitely needed and needed a lot more, especially as more regulation, more bad actors come in, and it's just kind of nature of the beast over here in this world. But good on you for starting on that. And Yeah, sounds like you guys can definitely help a lot of people, and like I said, I think it's definitely going to be more needed as we get kind of farther along in this space. And then
100%.
yeah, go ahead. Okay. Yeah. And then, from there too, not only have you founded, are you the executive director of Open Crypto, you're also co-founded the Vancouver Bitcoiners meetup and the Vancouver BitDevs meetup group. So tell us about like running a meetup group. We actually have Joey from the Canadian Bitcoiners podcast in here. So he's I know that there's a big meetup with the Platelet and Pleb who's setting that up coming I think in the 16th, I want to say. I don't want to get that wrong or anything like that. So Joey, if you're listening in the chat, be sure to give the details. But tell us what it's like to kind of run that meetup and how that's been, through these, I guess this roller coaster ride on the price that we got going on.
Well, first of all, ultimately, I suppose it does a little bit, but price doesn't really matter. It's about the technology and what it unlocks. And if you understand the equation and, everything, so infinity divided by 21 million, that's, to me, that's what Bitcoin really is. It's a store of value, money that actually holds value. And it's something that we haven't seen for a really long time, especially since we've completely separated from the gold standard for the dollar. So Vancouver Bitcoiners, so Vancouver's an interesting place. I have to be a little careful. I'm not going to name names, but there are a few exchanges and a few other, I guess, I don't know what you call them, just companies that have made great promises and they've swindled a lot of money and they've gotten themselves in a lot of hot water. Some have filed bankruptcy. Some founders have mysteriously disappeared. We had the Vancouver Stock Exchange, which was a ginormous failure, home of Ponzi schemes, many of them. And unfortunately, Vancouver kind of has this bad rap. It's a beautiful place to live, but it's also Hollywood North. There's a lot of film that's done here, pickup scenes and things like that. And Vancouver's weird because it's traditionally a natural resources based economy. So, mining, forestry, oil and gas, not as much, but those two, where it comes to resources, that's kind of what Vancouver was built on, if you look at the early days. And so when it comes to tech, I think we've tried to compete. We've tried to call ourselves Silicon Valley North, but ultimately when somebody gets a big enough idea, they end up going south of the border or somewhere else where there's actually venture. And I think that's, I don't know if that's having to do with just people in Vancouver are kind of tire kickers. They like to talk and talk and talk. And, then they're like, yeah, maybe I'll invest, $100,000. And then 6 months later, they'll change their mind and you're broken, bankrupt already. So it's a shame versus anywhere else in the world, capital flows a lot more freely. So one of the reasons, that's a very long-winded way of saying why Vancouver Bitcoiners is formed. We are Bitcoiners first. I kicked off the group in January, and it's actually an offshoot of a previous group called Decentralized Vancouver. So Decentralized Vancouver was initially, it's shut down now, but it's initially one of the decentralized chapters associated with the University of Nicosia. So I founded the Vancouver chapter in 2018. I was a chapter president for a couple of years, and then we had a couple of events going well. We had a good crowd and gathering, and then COVID hit. So all of the events were pretty much kiboshed, and so it takes a lot to do something virtually, and people were just kind of getting used to that, not really sure what was going on, and so we just decided to pause. And then so in January, I was thinking, now's a good time to get this up and going. So I put out just a general call to all of my contacts, and the only people that showed up were Bitcoiners, people involved in Lightning, privacy. What else? That's pretty much it. So I looked around the room and I said, even though we've been a Bitcoin first group, we're now officially a Bitcoin only group, and let's figure out what we're going to do. First, the first group was a social, and then we kind of thought about what we're going to do for a format. We settled on speakers, and then a couple months in, Alex approached us. So totally different Alex. He was associated with the BitDevs New York chapter, I think, and proposed the idea that we have BitDevs. So we do kind of a hybrid format. So basically what we do We start off, we usually have a guest MC, or we'll have open mic for, if people want to come up and announce things. We always have a live stream because I believe it's very important to reach out to a global audience. You never know where people are going to be. And we also have in person, which I also think is very important. So we'll start off with a speaker, we'll get into the BitDevs topics, we'll pause, we'll go into another speaker, and then we'll resume the BitDevs topics. And so we follow the traditional BitDevs Socratic format. So the discussion is about an hour and a half, and it's broken up by 2 speakers, shorter sessions with questions encouraged. So far we have had Leonard Weiss from Lightning Labs, we've had JB55 who's working on Damus, which is an implementation, basically an open communication protocol utilizing Nostr. So you can find that at Damus app and damus.io. Some really cool things happening there. I spoke, we've had, who else have we had? We had Katie Ananina from Plan B Passport, and she was awesome. And then this month, next Thursday, the 14th of July, we have Roman, one of the co-founders of Bitcoin Beach, calling in, and Celine Jin, who's formerly at Blockstream. She led UX and design there, and she's gone independent, so she's going to talk about Bitcoin design. So that's it.
That's awesome. So how frequently do you guys meet? Is it like a once a week, once a month kind of thing?
Once a week, we'd all be no, we'd all be exhausted. It's once a month. So we're usually every third Thursday. And if people want to find us, you can go to Van Bitcoiners on Twitter. We usually, if we have once we've figured out what we're going to be doing for that month, we'll pin that as our tweet. You can sign up via Meetup, and the live stream as well will be there. And if people don't want to sign up for Meetup, if they're concerned about their privacy, we always post the live stream day of. So just watch our Twitter account, and you're welcome to join the live stream if you're joining us remotely. Yeah.
That's awesome stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because I talk to a lot of people through this podcast, and a lot of them are in some way, shape, or form involved in some meetup, and it seems like every single one has their own kind of flavor to it, which I think is awesome. Some of them are, kind of how you described the beginning one, a little bit more social. Maybe just come meet up, have a drink, a beer or whatever, just socialize with some of the local Bitcoiners. Some of them are more formal, where it's more teaching, kind of going the ins and outs, maybe like a Bitcoin 101, and then some are more development, and some have like guest speakers and things like that. And I think overall, it's awesome to see, people like yourself kind of organizing them, because I know it takes a lot of work.
Yes.
And at the beginning, I did mention price, not because I care about it, but because I know personally from the meetup that I go to here in Tampa, is that when the price is ripping, the meetups are packed. And then when the price is down, like it is now, it is not so packed. So I bring that up just to ask, like, have you seen kind of, the way you describe Vancouver? It's a pretty interesting place, and I've never been. I've been to Toronto maybe when I was little, but I'm an American, so I haven't really been to Vancouver or know much about it. Have you kind of seen the push for tech and everything like that in the area, keeping people around, and you kind of have that core group and people kind of floating in and out? Or are you seeing kind of like I described, when price is down, numbers are down pretty good?
So we actually do have a pretty strong core group. So one thing I wanted to mention, so first of all, I completely neglected to mention that BTC Sessions is our guest MC for this next one. And he's also hosting 2 days later his workshop. So he's doing a self-custody workshop, and he's also doing an advanced cold card workshop that same day, July 16th. I believe he's fully sold out. I don't know that he has any additional openings, but you're welcome to email the show, or not email. You're welcome to DM the show. If there are any spaces, we'll get back to you if that's possible. But yeah, he's going to be here in Vancouver and hosting that also at Adapt Tech Group. And yeah, it'll be really, really good. One other important thing is it's not just me. It's we run it by executive committee. None of us have time to fully devote. So the people that are involved are Alex, as mentioned, JB55, William Casaran. We also have Leonard Weiss from Lightning Labs, and Jordy, I forget his last name, from Lightning Labs. And we have anyone else? We have a couple other people in the exec group. So whoever has time basically focuses on the group and puts out the meetup, and then we just kind of all show up and support one another. So it's a really cool way of running things. It's not so much like a distributed leadership model. It's just like, whoever's going to take it for the month takes it and runs with it. And it's interesting to see. So that's been really, really good. And like I said, really solid group. We do also have a few regulars. And there is another group here in Vancouver called BTC Van. So they just had an event last night. We are, I don't know, we're sister groups. We're certainly, we're not competitors. We encourage more Bitcoiners in the space, and they have a slightly different format. So they usually have talks and more of a social format. Last night they hosted Greg Foss and Seb Varney, and they had a massive turnout. They were like 180 or something like that. So it was really good. It was at a local place called Beaumont Studios, and shout out to them because they're one of the few event spaces here in Vancouver that is really unique, independent. They host conferences. It's like a maker space. It's very cool. And they survived the pandemic. They're one of the few places that actually did. That's one thing about Vancouver. It's all about condos, and all the cool nightlife just goes by the wayside because it's all developer land, unfortunately. So it's good to see some good independent places stay open. And so, yeah, so BTC Van, if you want to follow them, they also have monthly events. They're usually the week prior to us, and we go out and support their events, and they come to ours. So it's a good scene.
That's awesome stuff. So yeah, you guys are getting quite a few meetups. I'm sure maybe down the road, if it gets even bigger, now you'll have another one that splits off and does it another week, and then you'll have sister ones every single week. So if somebody wants to attend a Bitcoin meetup, they just got to attend Vancouver a certain week. You could probably find one, it seems like. So that's awesome stuff. It seems like definitely a growing community there. And yeah, I mean, sounds like you guys have had some big name guests. I mean, you said BTC Van had Greg Foss. You guys have BTC Sessions. I mean, awesome big names in the space, and a lot of support in Canada. I mean, I interact with quite a few Canadians just because I'm friends with Joey and Len from the Canadian Bitcoiners, and yeah, it seems like a lot of great stuff going on in there. So, and a lot of development and growth and everything like that. So awesome stuff to hear, out of Vancouver and everything like that. And yeah, let's move on to the next thing that you're working on here is the Team's Satoshi. So I believe it's founded by Vitus Zeller. I'm not sure if I butchered
Vitus.
that. Vitus, okay. And it's a Bitcoin and fitness group. So why don't you go into that? How does it kind of combine both Bitcoin and fitness? And what is, I guess, the overarching mission of Team Satoshi?
Sure. So before I do have to do a quick shout out to our one of our new sponsors, Bull Bitcoin. So I'm really happy to say that we're sponsored by them. They are Canada's oldest Bitcoin business, definitely OGs and very strong Bitcoin only company. So we're honored to be sponsored by them. So thank you, Bull Bitcoin. So Team Satoshi, founded by Vitus Zeller. And it was an experiment, I think, at the beginning. He's been a Bitcoiner for a long time. And he's been big into fitness. There's a whole group that are part of the leadership team that are like ultra marathoners and like you name it. I definitely felt out of my depth in the first few meetings. I've always been very involved in fitness. I've always been very active. But yeah, I mean, they take it to the next level. It's pretty awesome. So basically what Vitus did is he did I think it's a bike trip from Munich up to, I forget the exact ones, but if you go to his YouTube page, which is Team Satoshi, or if you go to teamsatoshi.org, it talks about the initial where from and where to. And he basically paid with Bitcoin the entire way, or tried to pay with Bitcoin. And he was successful, except for 2 days. So it was talking to local merchants and saying, I'm here, I'm trying to pay with Bitcoin. And most of the time he was able to, even if they didn't accept Bitcoin. So they take a chance on it. And it was pretty cool. And what we do is we have sports challenges. So we have Bitcoin pizza day. We do a run, celebrate by eating pizza after. We did a halving challenge, which was really cool. So the last halving, All of this is again on the YouTube. We basically had the beginning block of the old reward, and sorry, the last block of the old reward and the beginning block of the new reward. So we, what do we do? The whole plan was to have people exercising and kind of broadcast during those and make sure that they're exercising during those. And it's sort of you're exercising. It was a good concept. So we had people from all around the world participating. Tone Vase also, he had a halving show. I spoke with him just after and he participated, which is pretty cool. We had teams all around the world who were doing things like ice swimming. Like it was pretty intense. So it was really good. We also were part of, so there's Run for Halfin every January 3rd to 10th, which is put on by the ALSA Golden West chapter out of California. And I guess Bitcoin Runners, which was, again, kind of a sister group to Team Satoshi. Some of the founding members are parts of each. They reached out to us and said, hey, do you want to be part of this? And within 2 weeks, we managed to raise, we didn't manage to raise it, but we managed to get enough of a word out to, I think it was something like $40,000 was raised. So it was really successful. We're going to do that again this year. We've actually, we talk about usually once a month, the organizing group, and we'll do something as well for January. So if anyone wants to get involved, feel free to reach out. You can either reach out to Vitus directly, Team Satoshi O on Twitter, and you can reach out to myself as well, or any of my other channels. And Cryptography is also was really instrumental in getting us connected in there. So we really appreciate that. So it's a good crew, and it's for a great cause. It's for fighting ALS, and yeah, it's also to honor, of course, Hal Finney, famous cryptographer who first started running Bitcoin when it first started.
That's awesome stuff. Wow. So it sounds like you guys do a lot of running and everything like that. And I ran cross country and track in college, but I have no desire to be one of those ultra marathoners. So good on them for running that many miles and or kilometers, whatever. I mean, that just blows my mind. I don't know why somebody wants to run for that long, but hey, good on them for doing all that. Yeah, so let's get into, so you've also written some things, and you wrote for BTC Times, and coincidentally I did as well at one point. And so you also wrote for Citadel 21. So how has I guess writing in this space kind of affected you? Have you kind of did you find yourself more so like researching things and topics in the space on your own, and you figured, why not write a little bit for it? Or did you just kind of always have some sort of like inclining to write and get the word out on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I take a slightly creative approach. I want people to think bigger, dream bigger, and focus their sights. Like we live in a world that's it's pretty broken. All of our systems are pretty broken. I think we've seen that in the last couple of years. People have kind of, we saw rumblings of it in 2008. And it definitely now, I mean, I think blinders have been ripped off in most cases. And you just see like the general, I mean, I wouldn't say it's evil or anything like that, but I think there's just general corruption all around the world. And, positions of power breed corruption. It's just that simple. And so I think a lot of that power has gone unchecked for many years. Maybe it's masqueraded under certain forms of fairness, but you look under the hood a little bit, and it's quite concerning. So one of the things that I do is I channel, I guess I try to channel that into creativity. Like what I feel about like you can kind of implode on yourself and think like, oh, the world's, going to hell in a handbasket. What now? And that's not productive. Like you still have to live in the world. You still have, friends, family. You've got to create your own path, and you can't let that stuff get you down. It's good to recognize that it's there, and because not knowing that it's there can also be harmful. And, there's something to be said about ignorance is bliss. And I think anyone who has any degree of knowledge of what's going on in the world wishes that they didn't know to some degree. But at the same time, like, you can't know everything, of course. And I think what it ultimately comes down to is too much power breeds corruption. And whoever is making money, follow the money, and you'll draw some conclusions. The first piece that I wrote for Citadel 21, it was kind of a rally cry. It was called Phoenix. And I just looked at the world, and we were 3 months into the pandemic shutting down. And I was just horrified at like how Machiavellian our leaders were being, and how like people were full of fear. Nobody knew what was going on. And the only solution was, okay, clamp down. And you started seeing all of these other, you saw like just atrocious human behavior happening globally. You start seeing protests about anything and everything. And, I think the civic right to protest is important, but you start seeing just mass violence just based on I don't know, I think some of it was just pent up anger that people were feeling. And I don't know what the root causes were. That's actually not a great word to use, what the causes were. But yeah, it was appalling. And, it was really hard to find, I guess, any grain of truth, with what was going on. Nobody knew, like, are we in this deadly pandemic? People are dying, people are getting sick. What's going on? Things aren't starting to make, things don't make sense. And I think that was the general, that's definitely what I experienced. And then of course you look at all the people who had like the really harsh lockdowns, and it's just, I think we're going to look back and we're going to see that we all have globally, we have PTSD from that, at least in the harsher climates. And like, if you can, like, not being able to see your family members, like, that's just like, who in their right mind thinks that they can make that decision based on, fuzzy data? Like, that's just not okay. So Phoenix was a bit of a rally cry, and I just wanted to say, look, like, what you might be feeling, like, others feel it too, and others see it too, and yeah, there's something wrong. And that led to me speaking in Prague, the Hackers Congress that fall. I kind of continued that thread, and then I turned a little bit more creative with my other works. That was the start. BTC Times was very research-based. So I spoke to a Lightning developer, and it was good. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. I don't know if you experienced this, but with BTC Times, they have a pretty thorough editing process. So I think I had like 20 hours of revisions, like from start to finish. So it was good though. And it's nice to get that outside, I guess, opinion of writing, like, bring this out more, like, make this less wordy. And there's definitely an art to be able to get your point across in as few words as possible. It makes for a stronger piece without glossing over the details. So it's a bit of an art doing that. So that was great. And then the other 3 pieces that I have in Citadel 21 are focused on, it's a complete creative departure. It's awesome. I think it's basically a sci-fi vision of a hyper-Bitcoinization future. So what does it look like when Bitcoin is not just a global currency, but a galactic currency standard? Like, what does that mean, right? So it has, it explores concepts like Citadel worlds and artificial intelligences and like all sorts of other things, multi-planetary systems. And it started out as a scene. So it will eventually work itself into a book. I have the outline written, of course, in all of my free time, which I have exactly none of. I will be developing it, but it's going to take some time. And so what I wanted to do with Citadel 21 is be a little bit more detailed in some of the chapter excerpts, so I can go into more detail. And what I want the purpose of the works that I'm doing, I want that to really plant seeds in people. So I want them to think about, okay, like, things are messed up right now, but 10 years in the future, if everything goes according to plan, but if everything goes positively, and we get away from this CDBC nonsense into a more self-sovereign world, what might that look like? And what might it look like if we have all this amazing technological advancement that's like just right there? What if all that happens? What happens then? And so, yeah, definitely take the time to read it. Support Citadel 21. Havana and Katia have built something amazing. They have a great team behind them as well. And yeah, I highly encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd like to, go back a little bit to what you were talking about at the beginning, because I think, your first piece in Citadel 21 Phoenix is definitely, a point that a lot of people do not talk about enough. And, I'm in Florida, so, I'm a little bit different. I had a little bit different of an experience probably than you did in Canada. And, I think it's really interesting, and like people aren't going to really talk about, there's the effects of people, being locked down and away from their families, but there's also, the effects of the older generation, like locking them down and, keeping them segregated from their families and alone by themselves in their last dying years. And, especially limiting kids and, not seeing facial expressions, like seeing like all these kind of developments that we're going to see long term, just for, I guess a short-term panic, kind of based off some preliminary data, is something that, I think a lot of people, like you said, are just not really going to come back from, and they're not really going to change. And, I mean, in Florida, there's a lot of, like, you'll go to a grocery store, barely anybody's wearing a mask or doing anything of that nature. But there are a few people that are still, very scared like that, wearing gloves everywhere and just very now germophobic and everything like that. And, I just think using that fear tactic is going to have a lot of long-term effects, that we won't really know how that's going to affect the society long term. And I hope, like, eventually people could come out of it. But I think, there's a lot of people out there that, just won't, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's absolutely criminal what's happened. I mean, there are no other words. People are like, that's an overreaction. What are you talking about? Like, wearing a mask, like, oh, it's a huge assault to your civil liberties. But if you look at the beginning part and you look at the people that were warning and you look at where we are now, that, basically 20 years of, I guess, trying to get the right word, 20 years have passed in the wrong direction. So, we're seeing all of this massive overreach. And, when we start asking questions and you start saying, okay, well, show me the data. Oh, well, people tried to hide the data. And it's like, if you can't ask questions, there's a reason. And there's somebody who is profiting on the other end. And they don't want you to see the data because it's going to be contra to what they're telling you. And all of a sudden their profit stream is going to dry up. So unfortunately, we live in a world where, money, well, the old fiat system still thinks it's king. It certainly isn't, though. So.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of, I guess, leads into the next story. So, if you've been on Bitcoin Twitter, you've probably seen Nic Carter versus the Bitcoin Maxis. And, it's a story that keeps on giving. So, there's a lot of back and forth that keeps going. Nic Carter went on the Bankless podcast and basically said that, in the end, it might have ended Bitcoin maximalism. And then now he's kind of blocking off a lot of these big Bitcoin Twitter kind of names. But in my opinion, I think he kind of likes the attention, and he keeps digging himself like a little bit of a bigger grave, so to speak. But essentially, Bitcoin maximalists have kind of been going at him because his firm keeps, venture capital firm keeps funding a lot of these shitcoin companies and sponsoring a lot of these shitcoin companies. But I mean, I think at the end, like, he never really said he was like a Bitcoin maximalist, but he did a lot for the space. So I'm kind of conflicted. But how do you feel, I guess, about the term Bitcoin maximalist, and like how, Bitcoin only and, that kind of realm is viewed? Do you think like the Bitcoin maximalist view is justified, like being Bitcoin only and kind of sticking your foot down? Or do you think, we can kind of dance around this whole, I guess, shitcoinery world and just kind of hope that once they get rug pulled or something happens, that they kind of find their way to Bitcoin only?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the only cryptocurrency out there that's actually money is Bitcoin, and it's the only one that has sound principles. So, is there innovation happening in other coins? Perhaps, but it's not money. I mean, they're unregistered securities, full stop. And do you want to use some of the tech in your project? Maybe, but it's not money. And I think Bitcoin was created because money was basically becoming valueless. And you look at all the money printing that's happened around the world, and you look at the debt. Greg Foss gave a really great talk last night where he goes into a lot of the fundamentals. And if people don't know or don't follow him, I highly encourage you to. I also encourage you to look at WTF Happened in 1971, great website. And then, just look around and start doing your own research and start asking, like, if you're not a Bitcoiner yet, start asking yourself, what is money? And it seems like a really simple question, but we are never taught that in school. And we're never taught that in school because the people that benefit, it's not to their benefit to tell you. Even if you're in economics, like people are, it's sort of the unkept, or I guess the inside secret. And it's a shame because, people work their whole lives. Like, you look at the average middle class family, in the 70s, before the gold standard was completely removed from the monetary supply, and like, they had great prospects. And now you've got, there was maybe like one parent working, one parent staying home taking care of the kids. You had the sense of a nuclear family. And then if you look at 1971 and you look at all the chaos that happened in that 1 year alone, I mean, every chart it's an inflection point, and not in a good way. So you start seeing, destruction of the nuclear family, destruction of traditional values, all in the name of progress. And if you really look back and examine what happened, and who was benefiting, why things were done, taking the dollar off the gold standard was actually supposed to be temporary. And that's not something that a lot of people know. It's supposed to be for a few months. And of course, let's just keep it. It's working in our favor. Like, come on. Like, people wonder why we have no faith in institutions, right? But again, it's with immense power comes the opportunity for immense corruption and making a lot of money, and that is just irresistible for most people. I think if you examine it honestly, I would say there's probably 10% of the people in the world who are immune to any kind of bribery or financial enrichment, if they really, if it really came down to it. So, in terms of Bitcoin maximalism, yes, I mean, this is the face of a Bitcoin maximalist. Like, we're principled, and it comes down to, like, just don't shill people garbage and tell them it's gold. It's not. Look at why Bitcoin was created in the first place. Look at the economic conditions in which it was created. I mean, the global economy basically exploded in 2008, and shortly after, Bitcoin was there. And I think it's been an incredible hedge that is this small piece that somehow maintains value and kind of holds a little bit of order in the world that we're told, that we're brought up, that exists. And it is still there. You just have to look pretty deep for it.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think you'd be surprised at how many people that maybe don't pay attention to their money or things like that still believe that we might be on the gold standard still.
Nope.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think like just people in general, we get caught in this kind of like Bitcoin maxi bubble, maybe sometimes on Twitter. I find myself doing it, but I think the average person just kind of has no idea. And, you look at a lot of these things, you could look at pictures even from like 1971, you'll see a bunch of people in shape, on the beach or something like that, relaxing, having like that. And obviously in America, obesity rates gone up, birth rates have gone down, just generally signs of a very unhealthy society have kind of ticked upward. And I don't think people realize, like, at the end of the day, that kind of all trickles back to 1971. And the biggest thing that happened there was the dollar coming off the gold standard. And like you said, how much corruption can happen from that. And that's simply just from the manipulation of the monetary policy. And I don't know if like the average person really realizes how much money plays a role in everything. whether
Mhm.
it's food quality, whether it's, quality of education, where it's quality of almost everything. And, I agree with you 100%. It's like we were never really taught any of this in school. Well, I'm not necessarily because I don't think like many of the teachers, maybe they don't realize it, but I think, at the end of the day too, the institutions are the ones that benefit from it. And maybe that 2 to 3% inflation rate is just kind of so ingrained into everybody, they never really question it, and they just
Mhm.
kind of believe, hey, this is the status quo at the end of the day. So I think it affects a lot, and I think there's definitely got to be a change sometime soon. And we obviously here think that it's going to be Bitcoin, but I think a lot of these Bitcoin maxis are going at people just because they're upset, and I think they have a right to be kind of upset with how things are going because they're finally realizing it, and they're like, now that they've realized it, it's so obvious. Why don't you see it too,
Mhm.
sort of thing. And maybe some people don't like it, but because they're going at other people at Twitter. But I think, at the end of the day, it's something that needs to be done to kind of drill through some of these things because, like I said, some people are hard headed, and at the end of the day, a lot of these ideal or ideologies and the status quo has been drilled into your head for I don't know however many years you're in school. So.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's just, a sign of a community screaming, from the top of a mountain, like, "Hey, open up your eyes." But to each their own. And I hope, like, a lot of people that see this situation kind of look at, how Nic Carter and other people have reacted towards it, and ask themselves why the crowds have been going kind of at these people, and look into Bitcoin a little bit further, and thus maybe see the power behind it. So
Mhm.
I hope good things come out of it for sure.
They will. Anytime that an actual discourse is allowed to happen and run its course is important. One of the other things that I think is seriously harming society and just people in general is the ridiculous amounts of censorship that's happening in terms of, oh, we have to protect people from misinformation. Like, what? Like, are you kidding? Like, do you ever remember a time in your life where you couldn't have a conversation and like some words were forbidden? Like in Canada, we have, so Jordan Peterson's pretty famous up here for going against the status quo, and good on him. Um, we have compelled speech, and it's, I don't know how punishable it is, but there is a law in the books. I think it's C11 that you look into Jordan Peterson and he'll go deep into it. But basically, we have compelled speech, and you have to call people, by certain pronouns. It's literally written into the laws in our country, and like I'm sorry, but that's too far. And where it starts, I think, is I think it appeals to people's better nature. Um, you know, it starts as a soft pedaling. It's like, well, what you're saying, the words that you're saying, it really upsets this person. Can you maybe say them in a different way? And it's like, oh, okay, well, sure, that makes sense. Okay. And then it's just a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And then all of a sudden we're living in a world where people can't define women. And like, and the fact that like even saying men and women is just, I mean, that can get you kicked out of most polite society, and it's ridiculous. Like we have lost our mind as a human race. Like if the more we buy into this, and the more that we just sit by and idly allow this to happen. And I don't think coming back at it full force is the right answer either. I think just start putting out reasoned conversation. Start calmly asking, like, why do you think that? Or start challenging things, and just make sure that you're supporting voices that dissent. Because if you don't, pretty soon there will be no dissenting voices. And that's a big problem.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think, a big root of it is kind of what you said is like, all right, it makes somebody feel some kind of way, right? And so I think a big issue in society is that now everybody has to feel the responsibility of like, how my words make you feel or make somebody else feel. And, like, that's something that you can't really control. And so at the end of the day, people are trying to control that by, essentially walking on eggshells. And I think walking on eggshells has people focus more on, what they're going to say instead of like the point that they're trying to get across. And I think that, hinders creativity. I think it hinders like a proper discussion. I think it, hinders a lot of things. And so, I think it's not only, all these other factors of like big overarching things. I think it kind of hinders like the mental health of people as well, where it's like, okay, now I have to worry about offending somebody anytime I open my mouth. And I don't think that's, a sign of a healthy society at all, because, if I can't sit here and have a conversation with you without worrying about you getting upset, or you start to scream at me and then I say a word that upsets you and then you insult me, like that's never going to have a productive conversation. So I agree with you trying to ease into it a little bit, but sometimes those conversations are a little tougher than they need to be, unfortunately.
They are. What happens though, I encourage people to look into two words. Had this, and now it's of course escaping me. Yes, narcissism and gaslighting. Look at what narcissists do. Look at the whole mechanism involved in gaslighting, and then look at the world today and draw your own conclusions. The more you play into people's games, if they're of a narcissistic nature, they'll appeal all sorts of things like, oh, do this because it's kind to do this, and just listen with both ears, watch with both eyes.
Exactly. All right, now let's get into the next story, because I feel like I could talk about that all day. But Voyager. So Voyager has filed for bankruptcy. They filed on Wednesday. We're recording this on Thursday. So they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and what that essentially means, it's voluntary, and it, quote, maximizes value for all stakeholders. So Voyager and Celsius Network have been linked to Three Arrows Capital, which is also filed for bankruptcy. And it seems almost every company connected to Three Arrows Capital is struggling in some way, shape, or form. So it is a shame that it seems like a lot of these exchanges are kind of rug pulling people and stopping withdrawals and all those kind of things. But I think in the end, you brought up earlier how you're having a cold storage workshop with BTC Sessions. I think, in the end, it's going to kind of encourage everybody to look into the true power of Bitcoin, which is holding your own keys. So do you kind of, agree with that thought that, at the end of the day, these exchange rug pulls are going to kind of help in this space? Or do you always kind of feel that there's going to be some sort of room for an exchange because, maybe the older generation or the less tech savvy will not really trust themselves to hold their own keys?
Yeah, so that's a challenge. I mean, the right answer isn't hold your own keys, be fully self-sovereign at step 1. That's maybe step 20. Buy a little bit of Bitcoin, even if it is on an exchange, but take it off the damn exchange. Like, hold your own keys, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. And I mean, that has been a central principle to Bitcoin for a really long time, and for good reason. You look at all the exchanges that exploded. You look at Mt. Gox, you look at Quadriga, you look at the new exchanges and all of the financial houses that are going through that. Again, it comes down to there's a temptation to play with the monetary supply, because if you can stretch something, if you can write against it and somehow duplicate it, theoretically, you might think that you're duplicating it, but it's not actually. There's not actually more. So, yeah, buy Bitcoin for sure, hold it, and then take up boating.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of a lot of these boating accidents where people lose their keys, so it's really unfortunate. I, for one, have been in such boating cases as well. So
That's the true pandemic.
yeah, exactly, boating accidents. So speaking of losing Bitcoin, Core Scientific has sold their Bitcoin. So unfortunately, they didn't get in a boating accident to lose all their Bitcoin. They are a Bitcoin mining company, and they've sold quite a bit of their Bitcoin holdings. in order to, in order to make payments towards their ASIC mining machines, make additional capital investments, and pay down debt. So they've sold a total of 7,202 Bitcoin over the last month at an average price of about 23,000 US dollars. So they announced that they're going to continue to sell a lot of their Bitcoin holdings. Coincidentally, I think Nic Carter went on Pomp's podcast for for those that listen to that show. He did say he did have a somewhat of a good point, which is that he believes like the bottom is when Bitcoin miners start to kind of sell off a lot of their holdings. And, do you kind of see that, I guess, as maybe like a bottom signal? I'm not saying to predict price or anything like that, but do you see, I mean, Bitcoin mining at the end of the day is like a difficult business, right? Energy prices are going to increase, fluctuate, finding renewable energy and easy accessible energy, whether that's, maybe oil flare gas or some ways to find cheap and use the resources. To mine Bitcoin is probably like going to be the answer in the end, but it's going to take a lot of development and other things like that. So do you kind of see maybe some of these Bitcoin mining companies falling out and having to sell off just to stay afloat? Or do you see this as kind of like, I guess, just a nature of the beast when it comes to Bitcoin mining?
So that's the trouble with living in a fiat and not quite yet hyper Bitcoinized world. And do I think that Bitcoin is going to replace the US dollar and all fiat currencies? Probably not. But I do think 5-10 years from now, there'll probably be a basket of currencies. I do see the US dollar no longer being the global reserve currency, but I don't think it'll be Bitcoin. I think it'll be probably 10 currencies. I think there's really strong support for different countries like China and Switzerland, Swiss franc. Anything that is backed by gold that still holds some traditional sense of value. If you look at the countries that actually still hold gold, Canada has none, by the way, but we have maple syrup. Whatever good that's going to do for us. It's a little embarrassing to be a Canadian sometimes. Yeah. So, I mean, look, when it comes to companies that need to divest, okay. So, if you're a public company, you have a board and you have shareholders to answer to. So, if you have to make corrections, you either divest your assets or your people. And it doesn't matter what kind of company you are, but that is typically the hard decision that you have to make sure that you have enough cash for operations, or you borrow against that. It sounds like that's the situation that they're in. I think it's a pretty bad call to get rid of their Bitcoin for fiat, but I understand the need to have some liquidity. I don't know, like it's tough. If you look at other market makers, like you look at Michael Saylor, I'm certain that he's probably buying more Bitcoin. Nayib Bukele, he's buying more Bitcoin. Like you look at all of the rising centers of power, what are they doing when everyone else is selling their Bitcoin? They're buying your Bitcoin. They're buying more Bitcoin. So, I mean, in the end, money flows to the strongest hands. And I think that is ultimately a good thing. I think it's horrible if anyone's been caught in the crosshairs, if they've, lost their job because of the market and those tough decisions having to be made. I've definitely felt that as well. But it's a hard call, and it's part of the rocky road towards hyper Bitcoinization and Bitcoin really being a global currency on the scale that it should be.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think like it's difficult market conditions for not only, Bitcoin and the crypto realm, but it's difficult market conditions for every company. I think we're kind of probably creeping into a little bit of a recession, hopefully not a depression, but I don't really have too much faith with where we're going right now. And so, because of all this, companies are probably going to have to lay people off, and that's unfortunate. But like you said, it's either the people or the assets. And so, Core Scientific chose the assets in this case, and maybe it'll pay off for them in the end. But it's unfortunate to see them selling Bitcoin. But on the flip side, you did mention Bukele. And the next story is El Salvador, who's bought 80 more Bitcoin. So like 80 doesn't sound like a lot for a country, but I think he just buys just to maybe throw out a tweet and go at some people a little bit on Twitter. But I mean, it's funny because he sent out a tweet showing like screenshots of his buys, and it seems like he's just DCAing in like the rest of us. So he's almost like one of us. But so what do you think of like these big players like a Sailor, like a Bukele, who have like this incredible conviction? Because like you said, when you run a public company or you're leader of a nation, you have a lot of outside noise and a lot of outside influences that can definitely sway your view on something or have some sort of influence on you. And so what I like about Bukele is that I feel like at every turn he kind of puts his foot down and digs his feet in a little bit more and buys more Bitcoin. And same thing with Sailor. And it just is incredible to me with the amount of money that they're dealing with and the amount of influence. So what do you think of El Salvador's position and I guess Sailor to another extent as well?
So I think that they're making smart decisions. I mean, if you look at, I mean, that's the understatement of the century. But seriously, like Sailor is arguably one of the smartest people in the space. You don't have a company that's gotten to where it's gotten by not knowing how to read trends and look at information and handle things correctly. Like you just don't. So the fact that he's all in on Bitcoin, I think, is very, very smart, and I think he will probably be, they'll be valued pretty high when Bitcoin does recover. And I think it will, and it's not so much like you have to remember we're pricing Bitcoin in a devalued currency, right? So you have to factor that in. Yeah. I think Sailor's making a good call, and I really applaud the country of El Salvador to make Bitcoin. Like they have said, they put a stake in the sand and said Bitcoin is currency. And so now that is something that all other countries could follow by example. And I think the smart countries, maybe they're not part of the, the top performers, traditional top performers that have central banks and other garbage. I'm going to have to move after this. Anyway.
Yeah. But that's awesome. But I agree with you. I think El Salvador is showing a lot of moxie, just digging their feet in. But how do you feel about I guess the success of El Salvador when it's coming to the implementation? Because I think like a more developed nation, maybe like the United States or Canada, they couldn't really afford to bring in a new currency like Bitcoin and kind of go through some of the ups and downs that El Salvador is kind of going through. And so, how do you think, like, if El Salvador takes a while and it's unsuccessful for, maybe the next couple years, if that's, going to be a big issue? Or do you think, they kind of have like a longer time horizon, so at the end of the day, they'll be all right?
So they're already doing better than they were. I remember looking at the numbers probably about 6 months ago, and they were in a much better financial shape than they were traditionally. And I think the more countries that understand that start taking Bitcoin as payment for things, they start realizing that, oh, there's value there. Okay, well, maybe the traditional central banking model doesn't see it that way, but in the new world and whatever that ends up being, and I don't know, are we transitioning to some new world? Are we trying to fix the old world that's horribly broken? Maybe. I don't know what the end state's going to be, but I think having a little bit of Bitcoin, I think countries that take a chance on it, that understand the technology, I think are going to be in a better position. And also, you look at all the people that are in the top that benefit significantly from the existing financial system. Like, they're all saying things like, Bitcoin's rat poison and all sorts of other things. Yeah, it is. It's rat poison to them. And it's rat poison to a system that is predatory and has no basis of value any longer. So I think countries, if they want to participate in the global economy, and not this CDB nonsense world, but a world where there's actual value, I do think that holding a little bit of Bitcoin is going to be really important. And remember, most banks right now are insolvent. That's just not widely promoted because, I mean, you think things are bad now. Yeah, wait until there's a run on the banks, right? So having something that is transferable, that you can take with you, that if your country is imploding and there's all of a sudden no resources, there's no other way to pay for things. I mean, you probably want to have a combination of like gemstones, gold coins or something that you can carry, or some kind of inherent value. And of course, Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most important thing. And people say, oh, what if there's like an EMP or something, and we can't propagate the blockchain. Well, there are people that are working on ways to do that where there's no power required, and there's all sorts of other recovery systems. It's a hardened system. It's a battle hardened system. So Bitcoin, for the love of God, Bitcoin.
Exactly. And I think, in a growing digital world, if, all power and internet and everything like that is shut off globally, I think we'd have a lot bigger issues than, just Bitcoin. I mean, like at the end of the day, I don't know if I wouldn't have any access to my own physical money right now as it is, because I think people as it is use the little plastic card, they swipe the credit card, debit card, all that kind of stuff. I think, my generation, probably the generation under me, and is very, I guess, card heavy and digital money heavy as it is. So I think they kind of relate a little bit more to Bitcoin. And, I think that's not necessarily like a worry for them, but, I can, at the end of the day too, when I go places or I'm going on long road trips or something like that, my mom's always like, hey, pull out some cash. I'm like, I don't want to pull out some cash because I have to go to the ATM and then I have to pay money to get my own money out. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of development that still needs to be done in the Bitcoin space, but it is being done. And I think it's being done at a very quick pace. And I mean, I'm just excited for all the things that come forward. And I think there's a lot of development and a lot of push for it as well. And speaking of push, we're rolling into the next story, which is Duke Energy is now researching Bitcoin mining. So if you haven't heard of Duke Energy, they're the second largest energy corporation in the United States. And they're looking into Bitcoin mining for, quote, Bitcoin's utility. And so they're looking at being able to strategically locate miners on the system. And some of Duke customers are already using Bitcoin mining or Bitcoin mining equipment on their grid. So they're looking at kind of like placing them in strategic locations to kind of help power the grid and make sure that, everything is still running smoothly. And so, what do you think of, a lot of these? I don't know, it's very popular for oil and gas companies to kind of get in, and maybe we might see some solar companies start to get in as well. But do you think that this is going to be kind of a trend, and Duke Energy is kind of leading that, where a lot of these energy and utility companies are going to start looking into Bitcoin mining? Or do you still think like maybe Duke is just an off end, and this is going to be one case and we won't see another company like this get in till maybe 5-10 years down the road?
Well, I know that Duke is not the only one, so they definitely made a smart decision. Up here in North Vancouver, there is a company called Mint Green. So CEO Colin spoke at BTC Van, the very first one, talking about what they're doing. And basically they're reclaiming, so they have a bunch of Bitcoin miners under a library in North Vancouver, and they're utilizing the power to run electricity through a certain subsection within North Vancouver. So that's pretty cool. I think other companies that are looking to do that, like, why would you not? Like, if you can't, if the projects that you were looking to do are shut down for whatever reason, do what you can. And I mean, if you've got the infrastructure to run Bitcoin mines, I mean, it's an obvious no-brainer. Why would you not run Bitcoin miners? Even if you lose a little bit, the amount of energy that companies like an energy company, like you look at somebody like a BC Hydro, like if they're not mining Bitcoin, I don't know what they're doing, but I would hope that they are, and I hope that other utilities are. It's such a perfect fit. Oil and gas companies, again, anything that is close to any kind of power, any kind of renewable power. I mean, that's the other thing about Bitcoin. People are like, Bitcoin's boiling the oceans, and that is such horseshit. Pardon me for swearing. But it is like it's yeah, it takes a lot of money to secure, or a lot of energy to secure the Bitcoin blockchain, but for good reason. And, so what do we need to do in that sense? Like, well, okay, maybe we need to look at different things like solar and wind, how those can be incorporated into the solution, and maybe 10% of your power comes from there. And then it's a nice, easy transition into the quote unquote greener environment. I mean, yeah, like, do we need coal power to power everything? Probably not. I think, that we've got other forms of, power, like nuclear power and hydroelectric power and geothermal power and solar. So let's start looking at those solutions. And I think companies that are looking at and incorporating Bitcoin mining and incorporating Bitcoin in their solution in whatever way, be it Bitcoin or the Lightning Network, look for companies that are innovating in that space. And I think, if you're still in the stock market, God help you, but if you are, maybe look at investing in those companies, and then whatever gains you have, take them out and buy Bitcoin.
There you go. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think, yeah, as I stated a little bit earlier, a lot of these companies are going to try to find ways to maybe utilize some excess energy, whether it's flare gas or everything like that, especially in, such an inflationary time where overhead costs are getting more expensive. People are demanding a little bit higher salaries to kind of combat that, and companies are having to pay up. And I think, in order to kind of slow down or help slow down maybe some of these like rising costs, I think, first, taxation and other things like rising, maybe not help, maybe doesn't help, and a little bit easier access to capital. But another way to, kind of combat that is using that excess energy and all the resources that they can to mine Bitcoin, because, that's an easy way to kind of earn some profit there too. So I think we'll see more companies kind of come online and come to this conclusion as well. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some pushback or some regulation. And so the EU now is pushing for more surveillance on some Bitcoin transactions. So they kind of came out a while ago and say that they were developing this. But I didn't know, how strict they were going to be or anything like that. I had a feeling they were going to be somewhat strict, but a member of the EU Parliament actually took to Twitter to kind of shed some light on some of the upcoming Bitcoin and cryptocurrency legislation. So they want to monitor some unhosted wallets, and they want to verify identity of beneficiary owners of wallets looking to transfer more than 1,000 euros worth of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So if I had an unhosted wallet and I wanted to send 1,000 plus worth of Bitcoin over to you, it would not only require KYC from me, but it would also require KYC from you as well. So it seems like, they're kind of moving a little bit towards maybe the CBDC realm, where they want to monitor all these things. And I could see a lot more of these countries kind of start to develop that, because they see, maybe the power of the anonymity of Bitcoin, or the possibility of that. And so how do you think this all kind of plays out? Do you see, the development of CBDCs kind of happening? Because like we stated earlier, a lot of these governments are going to see the power of their power kind of taken away. Or do you see some countries kind of like El Salvador embrace Bitcoin, and people just kind of start voting with their legs and flocking to some of these more friendly and less controlling countries?
Yeah, I think, that's a loaded question, but an important one to talk about. Surveillance capitalism is awful. Like, if you look at some of the biggest financial crimes are done by traditional financial institutions. And what do? They get a slap on the wrist. And they want to have the audacity to scrutinize small payments from just everyday persons. I think that's why? Like, where is that need for control coming from? Like, people will say, oh, well, it's, it's for safety and it's to prevent like crime and trafficking and all these horrible, terrible things. Like, yeah, there's a lot of awful things that happen in the world. Is the everyday average person responsible for those? Probably not. So why the need to control? And I mean, it's just, I have some words to say about that, but I won't. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I think countries that take that overly authoritarian, harsh approach are going to price themselves out of this space. There, people that are working in on the protocols, working in companies that are utilizing Bitcoin or Lightning, I think are just going to move elsewhere. Like if you all of a sudden say, well, you've got to report on all of your transactions because, blah, blah, blah legislation about, this magical thing that we've made up. Why would a company subject themselves to that? Like you're already seeing capital fleeing places that are overly controlling, where there's, exorbitant tax rates. And yeah, I mean, taxation without representation. Those were some words a few centuries ago that carried some weight. And I think people are realizing why those are important. And, there's nothing wrong with, so the opposite side of that, there's tragedy of the commons. If nobody pays for anything, it's just like people by their very nature, not everyone is kind and, well-meaning. There's always going to be people that are looking for advantage. And one of the best things about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin is for enemies. Bitcoin rules by rules. We don't have a CEO. We don't have, a board of directors. We don't have any of those traditional capital controls. We have math. And essentially, math dictates what the protocol does. So I really loved your tweet where it says, friends and enemies, join the show. That's perfect because, it's a realistic look at the world. It's not all sunshine and roses. It's not all doom and gloom. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth, and that's been true for many years and many things.
Exactly. And I think that's a great place to kind of wrap it up here. So you've been very generous with your time and I really appreciate it. So why don't you tell everybody, I mean, we went over a lot of the stuff that you got going on at the beginning, but why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and what you got going on and, how they can help support.
Sure. So my main account is Alexandra933 on Twitter. You can kind of find all the other accounts through there. My personal portfolio account or website is advancedtech.io. So it's advanced without the D on the end because it's all about moving forward. So advancedtech.io. And everything is linked from there. The Open Crypto Foundation is opencryptofoundation.com. And we also have a Twitter account, OpenCryptoX. Team Satoshi is Team Satoshi O. Yeah, I think in the Advanced Tech podcast, it's kind of a weird one. It's because the name's too long for it to fit into a full handle. So it's ADV, so abbreviation of Advanced, and then Tech Podcast. So find us there, and we'll look for new episodes soon. It takes a lot of, as I'm sure you know, there's a lot of work that goes into producing episodes. But there are some really solid recordings with two lightning experts that I'm certain people want to hear from.
That's awesome stuff. So everybody go check that out. And I'll also have it all in the show notes and in the video description. So if you missed anything or you want to go check back it, so be sure to check out those show notes. And Alexandra, thank you so much for your time. And everybody go check out the Vancouver Bitcoiner meetup. Show your support in any way, shape, or form that you can. Give her a follow. This was an amazing conversation. You brought a wealth of knowledge, and I'd love to have you back on sometime.
Happy to. Well, thanks so much for inviting me. And keep going. We need more people who are out there speaking the truth. Don't let your distractors drag you down. Just keep moving forward. The future is a bright and amazing one. And keep your sights there.
Exactly. And that is it for us at the State of Bitcoin podcast.